Thomas Jefferson became the president in the election of 1800 as a Republican, but his party's ideals greatly differed from the Federalist. Their main ideals were Western land expansion and trade. With buying to Louisiana, he would have access to one of the biggest rivers in America, mainly for trade. After the 7 Years' War, or as the Americans termed it, the French and Indian War, which was from 1756 to 63, the French slowly began to take back New Orleans, as well as the land west of the Appalachians. However, their rule of the land was purely for want of the land, not interest in trade or the people in it. New Orleans was a big port for the U.S., mainly because of it being on the mouth of the Mississippi River. With this port, American trade just began to pick up, especially the economy. Once that got close to American ships, however, Americans west of the Appalachians were also landlocked. Napoleon possessed an agile mind, imperial demeanor, and enormous need for money. If the sales of a territory he already considered to be American could bring in some ready cash, why not sell it? His Ministry of the Treasury, Marquis Francis de Barbet-Marbois, was a man who served in the U.S. and married an American woman. He was a good friend of Jefferson, mainly because of the time he spent there. He convinced Napoleon in better trading with Jefferson, and also to sell the Louisiana Purchase to Napoleon. This transaction costed $1 million, quite a lot of money in this time and age as well as then. Since he knows both countries, he is a good delegate to both sides on settling the deal. It only took a month instead of the usual 3, including negotiations and traveling of letters, etc. Napoleon wanted to sell the whole of Louisiana to Americans. The only thing was that he wanted to buy one town in Louisiana, which was New Orleans, but Napoleon already considered the land a lost cause. Napoleon had failures dealing with this lowland. In some, he tried to reinstill slavery, or the British controlled most of the land of the West. When America came knocking, he figured it would be better to wash his hands of the hassle for quick money. Now that Jefferson had bought the land, he only had one goal in mind: to have a man leading the expedition with some guidance involved. The message was the same in each case. The expedition has been authorized, but it's still confidential. I have chosen Captain Lewis to lead it. Lewis needs advice and instructions. The letters made it clear that Jefferson intended the recipients to provide advice and instruction without cost to the government. He had already spent way too much money on the purchase. Now he needed to provide the team financially without spending too much money again. Clark was chosen as Lewis's partner in leading the expedition. A team of men was assembled, and now the only thing to choose was how to take the path and what to bring with them. The expedition resulted in a surplus of 4 essential commodities: lead for bullets and powder to fire them, ink to write with, and powder to write on. It was equally significant to the rest of the team, however, that they should have whiskey as well as tobacco. Ammo was needed in case of battles with unfriendly tribes or shooting dangerous wildlife. Ink and paper were especially for reports and map-making or journaling. You couldn't write home with no other mail posts. Others needed tobacco or alcohol to continue through the hardships and addictions. Especially in the cold, dealing with Indians might be trading alcohol or maybe some game they caught. The compass and spyglass were one of the most instrumental pieces during the journey. With a compass, they could tell which way they were going, and a spyglass meant they could be able to look out over the land as well as for any native tribes. However, many hardships happened during the journey. Most of the time, there's barely any game during the mountains and got very cold. they had to constantly abandon supplies in order to get across rivers or mountain ranges. And although they carried a copy of Richard Curran's Elements of Mineralogy on the expedition, it was basically a laboratory manual, meaning that they couldn't identify most of the rocks along the way. Instead, they drew pictures and vivid descriptions of what they looked like, or what they were. Many of the Indians didn't give very clear and precise instructions though. Most of them were look for a certain rock and then go left, which confused many of the people as they needed specific instructions on where to go. In any case, from that time on, the contrast between the simplicity of the Indians' directions and the complexity of what they really found is a measure of the bewildering confusion that they must have felt but never wrote of. Luckily, they had Sacagawea, a woman who spent time with the French army when she got captured and got stolen from her people. He could expect to meet Sacagawea's people. Luckily, Lewis and Clark had Sacagawea. She was stolen as a young girl from her tribe by the French. Over time, she learned how to speak English as well as many native languages and became a guide for Lewis and Clark throughout their journey. She got them out of many troubles, mainly by being able to talk to the other tribe and explain that they were peaceful and they were on a mission to just explore the land. Language during the journey was a major factor. If you said the wrong word, you could offend the entire tribe and have them go after and kill your men. You were establishing relations for the first time as well, and also Lewis and Clark needed to make sure that they would be peaceful in order to establish colonies there later. Jefferson realized what important allies the Indians would be. Especially if two powerful nations, they must stand well together because in their quarter they are miserably weak. They would not know the land at all if it weren't for their cooperation, and trade would be much less high. One special tribe of Indians that I would like to draw attention to is the Osage Indians when they first met with Jefferson at the White House. On the 13th of 1804 July, they did not know the use of liquors, but they did not also know the way society works for white men. They were considering them to be hospitable, but they also knew that they needed to get along nicely. So treaties were made, and having diplomatic relationship with them proved to be great allies. They could also be key traders and ways to make friends with other smaller tribes. Another way to get them friendly were alcohol, as they didn't know how to drink very well. They never knew of it before and slowly became alcoholics. This came to unwise decisions with chiefs and led to many tribes getting wiped out. After the War of 1812 and Tecumseh's death, Indians could no longer have governing of themselves. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 made sure of that. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 clearly stated, where the land claimed and occupied by the Indians is owned by the U.S., or the United States are bound to the state within, it lies to extinguish the Indians' claim thereto. It meant that all Indians in U.S. territory belonged, like slaves, to the government. They owned the land and what they stood for. The Indians there were forced to move to separate locations, and this led to the Trail of Tears. The relocation culminated in the 1830, which was a forced march west, during which thousands of Cherokee died especially. Many tribes got wiped out, thanks to that policy, and authorized President Jackson to transfer Native Americans from the eastern U.S. to the western territories. The relocation of almost 90,000 Indian hunters, hunting families on the Great Plains in the 1830s, as well as settlers, clearly introduced a new level of human stress on the buffalo population, as that was all they had to eat besides what they farmed. Many people died along the way, being beaten or starved, and the survivors, along with remnants of about 15 other nations in northwest Oregon, who marched from their homes to a 69,000-acre coastal reservation. There they were forced to farm and gave up their heritage. To this day, many of those tribes are wiped out, but their culture still stands.